Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar, Sri Lanka, Reimagining the Tourism Journey Ahead by Delivering Age Communications and C9 Hotelworks. This is the fifth in the series of destination recovery webinars that we've been running. We've run them in Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, and last week the Maldives. So we're really delighted to be here today. My name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO of Delivering Age Communications, and I'm going to be your moderator today. So before we get going, just a couple of quick housekeeping points, please. There's a Q&A function below. Please write in your questions into that function, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the session. The session is going to last about 60 minutes. There'll be questions for about 15 minutes after that. The session is going to be recorded too and sent to everyone who's registered as a link to download, so you can review that, and there'll be some presentations also. Right, let's get going. We've got 600 online today, so that's fantastic, and thank you all very much for joining us. And we're absolutely delighted to be here with so many visionaries in the Sri Lankan tourism industry, and we're covering destination, airlines, finance, hotels, government, and specific markets like China, who will shape the future of the destination and the recovery strategy. So this new future is fast approaching as the country is poised to reopen to international visitors on August 1. So with no further ado, and with that in mind, I would like to welcome you to our first guest, please. Kimarli Fernando, Chairperson of Sri Lanka Tourism. Kimarli, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's just get started with that, if I may. It's just fantastic news that Sri Lanka is going to be reopening to international visitors on August 1. The question for you, please, is what steps are you taking to entice international travelers to Sri Lanka, while at the same time being conscious of the new environment with new health and travel protocols in place? Kimarli, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. We've had a very successful, we've been very successful in managing the COVID virus, as you know. As of yesterday's data, we had 1,859 COVID patients in total. Of course, a lot of them have recovered. About 1,122 have already recovered. But if you look at the COVID patients, you would see a significant portion of imported patients, 557, and what we call the Navy cluster of about 903. The last patient from the community reported was on the 30th of April. So with that in mind, having success on that side, we actually gradually opened up for domestic tourism. So from May, we opened up for domestic tourism. We have a very detailed guideline, runs into about 90 odd pages on which permits actually the banquets, domestic tourism, and so on. 1st of August, we've decided to open the airport, and some have asked the question, why not July? But also the reason is that we have lots of Sri Lankans who, for whatever reason, is more comfortable to come back to Sri Lanka. So we are giving that opportunity June, July for our own Sri Lankans to get back. The detailed guideline, which is running into 90 odd pages, is given now to the industry, and we are actually going through a certification process. We are at the moment trying to select, there are two international auditing firms that have bid. So we are going through the process of procurement and going through the evaluation process. So after that is done, we will start certifying hotels. The procedure, I have to say, is a little stringent because of the fact that this is kind of led by the health ministry, if you like, in terms of the guidelines. So there's multiple PCR tests to be done. But the good news, unlike some other countries, is that we are not looking to quarantine tourists when they come in. So that is the first point. It's open on 1st of August. We will be not quarantining any tourists, and that we will be having multiple PCR tests. And of course, the protocols that hotels, not only hotels really, it's a all of government approach, because it is all the sites, the restaurants, so we have done a detailed guideline, and we have actually implemented most of it, except the hotels which we have not certified, the accommodation sector. But the public are very much aware. People are wearing their masks, the keeping social distance, and because we've been locked down for about 2 months. So we are really quite confident. Yes, the initial tourists, I think, would be more so the expat Sri Lankans, possibly, who are already contacting us and looking to get back home, if you like. But I think that going forward, tourists will look at, there are so many areas that they would look at. First, they would look at where they are and what are the restrictions they have in their own countries. Some of their own countries have put quarantine and so on. So they would have to look at their own countries and government's regulation. Then, of course, they will look at the airlines, and this is going to be key, the direct flights. So we are in touch. Actually, we met with the airlines, and all of the airlines who already were flying to Sri Lanka have given their commitment to continue with their flights. And actually, we have additional requests for charter flights coming in. Actually, with COVID, what happened was we actually increased the number of international airlines also in Sri Lanka to 5. Now we have additional airport in Ratmalana, so that's 5. So from a potential guest point of view, he'll have to look at what's happening in his country. He will have to look at the airline he's coming in, and whether there's direct connectivity, which will be critical going forward. What Sri Lanka has done, and I think there we have done really well, and most Sri Lankans, most of us are very proud of what we have achieved. And then they would possibly look at what is the medical facilities in Sri Lanka and how we've handled that. So yes, I hope I answered your question, and if you have any more, I can do so. As I mentioned, I have to leave in about 20 minutes or so.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you. And I'm not going to ask you to go into detail on all of those 90 pages. Thank you. It's great news about the quarantine and understanding on the PCR tests. What steps are you taking to entice international travelers currently? What's in the plan?
Yes, the global promotion campaign was approved by the cabinet, as you may know. It was the first time the 5-year plan was approved by a government. So that was approved actually, and already the process of the terms of reference, all that is actually being done. And because it's a government is involved, obviously, so there's a procurement process, evaluation committee, all appointed and so on. So we are proceeding on with that. We are not going to really go for a really hard marketing campaign right now. I don't think this is really the right time to do this. So we are basically, with Sri Lankan Airlines, we have a joint promotion campaign. We are actually looking at an approach where we inform the world we are safe, which we are, and we have a very stringent procedure, which lots of people have complained about. But we have no choice. We have to do that because first, our citizens' safety is paramount. So we need to make sure our citizens are safe, and then our guests who visit us are safe. So it's a stringent guideline. We will tell the world we are open. We are ready to welcome you. We will have a stringent procedure. However, if you come to Sri Lanka, you can make sure that when you leave, you don't have COVID, and that you will have a country where you can come back, because we are looking at also giving 5-year multiple entry visa going forward, which the government has said they would do that. And after the elections, we will be looking at giving 5-year multiple entry 6-month stay.
Kimarli, thank you. Are there any incentives that are being offered to tourism businesses to get them back on their feet? It's obviously been a difficult time for everyone in the tourism industry. Are there any particular incentives that you would like to share, please?
Sure. Basically, what we've done is that the cabinet has actually approved it yesterday, where all in the industry, everyone who's registered, whether you're a hotelier, DMC, a travel agent, restaurant, whatever, registered with us, basically you will be able to get a loan for your staff as long as you have paid the employee's tax. That loan you will get for 6 months to pay your 6 months salary at 4% interest. and the loan will be for a period of 5 years and with a grace period of 2. That's the first one. Number 2 is we've given extensions on utility bills. We've given extensions on the insurance, if you have taken leases and so on. We have given extension of 1 year for anybody who has taken a lease for tourism. We have also looked after the tour guides and drivers and given them a one-off payment. So yes, a very comprehensive, I don't want to get into the detail, but very comprehensive cabinet paper was approved yesterday. We are now in the process of implementing it.
That's great news. Really, really great news. Are there any particular trends emerging post-COVID that you think Sri Lanka can really tap into that will help drive your tourism recovery?
Absolutely. I think what a tourist is now looking for is probably not big cities. Looking for nature, slow travel, wellness, which we are really going, actually EU is helping us with the wellness, because our local Helavedakama Ayurveda, which we are going to scale up, because we don't have enough product, frankly. So we're going to scale up on the wellness, wildlife, frankly, we are an island that everything you need post-COVID is there. It's the beaches, the wildlife, the forests and everything. So yeah, we are really quite positive, and we've used this opportunity also to create with UNDP and our government technology company, travel app, which has not been there before. So it's creating new opportunity, COVID, really. And I think from the technology side, I think we can really move forward. I think there's opportunity for us with technology. And our hotel industry, I mean, they're used to health and safety. I mean, hospitality industry, they're used to this. So I don't believe that it will be a huge challenge for them to implement the guidelines. And I am looking forward to first possibly our domestic travel, our expats coming in. You mentioned in your introduction China, yes, for sure. And we are looking at in discussion with another country in creating a corridor, which looks very positive. And I will not mention it right now because there are some meetings actually I have to go for now on this. So yes, we are working on some very positive initiatives with other countries.
Kimarli Fernando, thank you so much for your time. It's been very, very interesting, insightful, and timely. I'm going to say thank you very much, and I understand you need to move to another meeting. Thank you for your time. I'd like to move on to David Keane, please. David Keane is the CEO of Quo, Asia's leading hospitality brand strategist. David, I know you have a prestigious guest. If I could just hand over to you, please.
Thanks, David. Thilan, can I ask you to unmute yourself? Thilan Wijesinghe is an entrepreneur and an investment banker, a former Sri Lankan cricket player, one of the founders of Tea Trails. He's worked very closely with Serendip Leisure and many other notable Sri Lankan tourism organizations and other public-private organizations. He's also the former chairman of the Board of Investments in Sri Lanka. Thilan, it's a joy to have you with us. Thanks.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thilan, I know we've spoken a lot about this offline. What structural changes are you seeing within the industry as a function, I guess, of the Easter attacks as well as the virus?
The structural changes in tourism, David, is also a function of the ease of restructuring of a business in Sri Lanka. So there are certain laws that permit us to restructure, certain laws that are relatively more rigid, such as the termination of employment. So I was greatly encouraged also at the fact that, as Kimarli pointed out, the Cabinet of Ministers have approved what appears to be an ability for tourism businesses to restructure themselves. So I think the fundamental changes that are going to happen post the restructuring, I believe there'll be a shrinking of inventory. There'll be a greater focus on both the indigenous brands as well as the international brands would look at Sri Lanka again, because there will be opportunities for acquisitions, particularly those brands that acquire their own assets. I think there'll be probably less demand for international brands that are purely doing management contracts, but again, that's just a hypothesis. Overall, I believe the tourism industry will emerge with greater maturity because, as you're aware, David, we had a almost a 30-year conflict in our country. And when the conflict ended in 2009, many first-time tourism entrepreneurs embarked on tourism products and tourism ventures that were wrongly positioned, poor management, wrong product in the wrong location. And I think those hotels that were doing relatively poorly pre the Easter tax may go through a recycling of capital. So there could be very well be fresh capital coming in, more mature management, and we'll see an industry that is emerging far more stronger with better management, greater capital for refurbishment.
What are the incentives? I mean, we talk about restructuring, we talk about kind of relatively old-fashioned or traditional forms of structure within the hotel industry in Sri Lanka. What are the incentives for investors and what are the incentives for owners now to make these changes?
Well, the incentives are primarily the tax holidays and accelerated depreciation allowances. There's also foreigners can actually lease land for 99 years, unlike in the case of Thailand where it's a shorter period. And foreigners can also own strata title apartments. So therefore, the legal framework is by and large in place. I believe that the government is also announcing a package of incentives. They have reactivated what is called the Strategic Development Projects Act, which allows very liberal tax incentives to be given, particularly to large-scale investors. And of course, we have the Board of Investment, where when you make an investment, whether it's local or foreign owned, the BOI signs an agreement, and those incentives are then enshrined in the agreement for the duration of the business.
Thilan, you talked about attrition within the industry, and you talked about, I mean, which again indicates kind of fairly significant change. How serious do you think the attrition will be?
Extremely difficult to predict. If I know when the vaccination is going to come, and human psychology, I've had a degree or maybe a PhD in psychology, but it could be anywhere from 20% to even 35%, David, is what I'm getting at. But here's my point. The older hotels, the legacy properties that require fresh capital to refurbish may actually either wind up or be sold as new real estate. So there could very well be a knocking down of, say, legacy properties of 30 or 40 years of age, because the owners, by virtue of taking on additional debt, however concessional they may be, they'll have balance sheets that are extremely stretched by the end of this COVID period. So where do we find the money for further refurbishment and repositioning? So that's my guess. Those who cannot muster the capital, they will be forced to sell for real estate value, and there'll be fresh capital coming in. So in the short term, yes, there will be attrition, but gradually a better positioned product will come into play. And I believe taking a 5-year position, Sri Lanka will be better positioned to take our tourism to the 3-4 million tourist arrival level from the pre-COVID 2 million level.
That's right. I mean, it's clearly, I mean, really, really fascinating that while, you know, both force majeure incidents or, you know, terrible incidents that have happened may finally result in the legacy, the balance sheet legacy, the traditional structures of companies and of actually moving along or evolving and creating a stronger industry. I mean, you mentioned also your belief that it may be an opportunity now for international brands to come in. Are you thinking in this regard where international brands are coming in and investing as well?
Some international brands, it's probably fewer international brands would invest, particularly the Asian brands would look at investing. But I would also believe that local brands will relook at their positioning in order to, as I mentioned earlier, in order to compete in a post-COVID era. But also what's interesting is what Kimarli mentioned about, you know, Colombo versus the hinterland, the resort tourism segment. I believe the catalyst that will change Colombo would be the integrated resort, initially the waterfront, which is being built by John Keells. by the time it opens, it'll probably be a year and a half down the road. I think this COVID will be history. And for the first time, we will have an integrated resort in South Asia. And I expect eventually the MICE business, the conventions business, and the entertainment, the shopping business to emerge. The government is looking at tax policies to make Colombo a shopping destination. And then, of course, you have Port City. Sri Lanka is the only South Asian city that is built, that's doubling its CBD via reclamation, and it will be the only master planned central business district in the whole of South Asia, and of which more than 50% is residential. So also I believe Colombo has an opportunity of repositioning itself with the entertainment, with the MICE, with the integrated resorts, with the theme parks, and attracting a new breed of residences who take advantage of this particular area being declared as a special economic zone, which the government is considering, which hopes to attain top 25 ease of doing business. So you'll have an enclave within Colombo that could make Colombo itself a destination, not just for tourists, but for international residents to have their second homes and corporate headquarters governed by an overall special economic zone law that will promote service industries. And of course, entrepreneurs as well.
And very quickly, because I think we're out of time, but could and should be a catalyst or to precipitate the redefinition and the reperception of Sri Lanka as a whole.
Absolutely. I believe both Colombo and the resort destinations, it's time for us to drill down and get our positioning right, get our product right, get our service portfolio right. And it's, as Kimarli mentioned, however tragic it might be, it is a good chance for us to reflect and reposition the country going forward.
Thilan, I mean, we could talk for a long time, but there's a lot of other people who are waiting to speak. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Thilan. Excellent stuff. Really, really interesting on future thinking and restructuring. We're going to move on to hotels now. Dileep Mudadeniya is the Vice President Brand Marketing at Cinnamon Hotels and Resorts. He's the CEO of Cinnamon Life Mall and Vice President of John Keel's Group. Dileep, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dileep, I just wondered if we could just start off and set the scene a little bit. How are you currently doing? How are you addressing the crisis at the moment, and what are you doing to prepare for the reopening?
Yeah, I think the best, I think the most important thing is that we should be optimistic of future. While we talk about new norm, we shouldn't forget the fact that there might be an old norm as well coming in. So it's very important to understand the market dynamics, and so far I've been telling that all the research that was done said that this is going to happen, that is going to happen, this way it's going to happen, have proven wrong in terms of human behavior. The reason being that we know how the human behavior cannot be predicted. So keeping that mind, not to lose hope, is the first thing. And second thing is that make sure that any other businesses that they do, it's easier said than done in terms of managing your cash flows. I mean, keeping on to your cash and make sure that you navigate this period very, very carefully. And that's basically financial prudence, which the organization should have to steer and go through this period. Third one is actually, we were talking about physical distancing, but not about brand distancing. So it's very important that, brand is stay closer to your target audience and keep on reminding that you're there. It may be a destination, a hotel, or any other brand. And there are enough and more examples on that, how people have done it and executed it. So we would be actually focused on that. And the fourth element is your health and safety standards. There was certain expectation of health and safety standards in hotels. There are books and books written on it. There are manuals written on it. End of the day, it comes to a few areas that you're looking at it. Of course, you have internal customer and external customer both to be taken care of. So those are the four things that we are looking at it. And the fifth one is how is your recovery marketing plan takes place, and what are the audiences that you're focusing on a short term, medium term, and long term, and how do you approach them in that context. So those are the four things that as a group we are working on, apart from many other strategies that we have put in place. And it looks like all coming together, and we believe that the impact will be reduced very soon. And then of course recovery we can't expect this year, but of course it will take, as a lot of people have predicted, maybe a year and a half, maybe two.
Thank you. I think the issue of cash flow is on a lot of people's minds in the hospitality sector. What have you, just a couple of details in terms of your group and what you've been doing during the lockdown period? Has it been in terms of your staff? Has it been have you been refurbishing? Have you been tailoring your plans? What have you been doing over the last couple of months?
So the last couple of months is actually it is too soon. One thing we knew that we did not have enough data to take any decisions, and not to rush into decisions, in terms of laying off people, etc. There could be certain adjustments in the cost that, like every other brand, has to do. So we have done it. And the second thing is we were looking at, say, what is the market behavior, and we were watching what's going to happen. That's the most important thing, with anticipation. And of course, reducing the cost and maintaining the current hotels, and looking at the plan that, what we're going to do once we open, and preparing ourselves, gearing ourselves. Once the good time comes in, how do we react? So that's all about preparation, financially, operationally, and also from a marketing perspective and brand perspective as well.
Right, fantastic. I'm going to stick with cash flow just for the moment. We've talked. We've obviously got the openings coming up. Will you be opening in August? Will you be looking at a staggered opening? It's obviously going to be a very soft return, and the market's going to return very, very softly. What are your plans over the next few months regarding the opening of your hotels?
Yeah, so we have three types of operations. The first one is F&B operation. We started already in city hotels delivering, which has a tremendous feedback. And we also had basically restaurant people coming into the restaurants. And we had last week around 3,500 covers that, people came in, almost 80% occupancy in most of the restaurants that we opened. So it's a very good sign. Second one is a banquet. So we had already, with the new guidelines in place, we have put it across, already held some weddings, which is actually a bread and butter for city hotels. Third one is we're looking at now opening from this weekend onwards for the locals, the domestic market, who wants to travel on various parts of hotels. Certain hotels will be open for that. And then when we know very clearly what the plans are with the foreign tourists and the program that the airport is going to put in place, aircraft arrival, etc., from 1st of August, then that process will be also in place to accommodate whoever tourists that are coming in. So currently, as in that order, F&B, banquet, domestic tourism, and the fourth one is international tourism based on the guidelines the government is going to introduce.
That's great. Just in terms of tourism behavior post-COVID, are you looking at tailoring any of your product offerings to new circumstances, or will you revert to what you were doing before because it was a successful way of operating?
It's a little too early to say again what kind of a segment, but it's very important that you have really a solid segmentation strategy in terms of when you're catering. Currently, all research pointing out to three main segments. One is we are looking at young professionals, 25 to 35, 38 kind of a group. Second one is domestic traveler. Third one is the backpackers. Those are three segments. That's going to be the latest research released about 2 weeks back you're talking about. But in the meantime, there are other sub-segments who are people emerging on wellness, basically treating on some sort of patients, on cancer patients, etc., who are actually domestically driven solutions. Long stay clients coming from Europe who actually fear of second wave in those countries. Then people who are coming for wellness, the returning or the wellness travel, people, especially the frontline health workers who are looking for such vacations to coming here. So those are the main segments that we're looking at it. The rest of the segments, we will see how it evolved. But I think if these four have been properly targeted, we should be able to create some impact.
No, that's great. When do you think you'll be up? When do you think all of your hotels will be reopened and you'll be at full speed again?
I think that within the month of June, we will reopen all. I mean, this weekend, we're opening about 3 to 4 hotels. The balance hotels will be open by end of June. Depending on the demand and when the people coming in. So we would look at from July onwards.
Fantastic, very, very positive, and really good to hear. Just in closing, are there any particular opportunities that you see in the market post-COVID to do new things, to think a little bit differently, given the new conditions?
Absolutely. I think this is actually, I mean, we've been telling as well, especially countries like Sri Lanka, we should actually move towards purpose-driven tourism and to understand what we really need in Sri Lanka and what type of tourism that we need. And it's very important to understand that, strategize it and move towards. And then some of the mistakes that we have seen in the past, it's an ideal time. You know, Sri Lanka is an ideal example of actually a good platform that we have received, and to adjust our tourism to fit into the future developments and make sure that we are driving what we call purpose-driven tourism in the country.
Fantastic. Dileep Mudadeniya, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. I'm gonna move on. I'm going to introduce Danushka. Danushka is the editor of Travel Talk Asia, Sri Lanka's first and only travel trade publication for the past 17 years. Danushka, would you like to welcome your guest today, please?
Thank you, David. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Hi, I'd like to introduce Amit Sumanapal. Amit has over 25 years experience in the DMC sector. He was originally with the John Hughes Group, overlooking the leisure arm of Walker's Tours. Then he moved on to head the leisure arm of Sri Lankan Airlines, which is Sri Lankan Holidays. And he's presently working with Haley's Tours. Amit, thank you so much for being with us. We're so glad to have you. Could you give us a brief outline on the importance of the DMCs in Sri Lanka? I know that in some markets, the DMCs don't play a very active role, or they're not considered a very important area for the tourism mix. But in Sri Lanka in particular, the DMCs are very strong. Could you just give us a brief on the importance of the DMCs, especially now as we go into a post-COVID era?
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. Yes, most certainly. Just to give you a background to the DMC role in Sri Lanka, we have two areas that we specifically focus on. The DMC is looking after the one-stop shop concept. We participate as a destination management company, dealing with many supply chains, from hotels to restaurants, national guides to guide lecturers, to chauffeur guides, to jeep operators, to wildlife parks, to all of that, and putting this entire package in a country like ours and offering it as a complete solution as a one-stop shop. So that's a destination management part. Then on the DMC side, we also do destination marketing part, which we do overseas. We engage with our tour operators, engage with them and visiting their offices, take part in promotional activities. We do go and do training to their call center staff, who are eventually the frontliners in respective offices. We sit down and negotiate with them for additional brochure space to ensure that Sri Lanka is given the due recognition vis-a-vis our competing countries. So there's a tremendous amount of work that we do overseas as well to ensure that Sri Lanka is on the map, and that the tour operators, among many portfolio of many of their products, they give Sri Lanka the prominence and the recognition as well. So we essentially, in that aspect, we work as almost an extended arm of Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau, inviting passengers through the tour operators, inviting passengers to come to Sri Lanka. As a destination management company, we don't essentially market a particular hotel or a particular segment. We invite people and we offer multiple number of hotel chains or hotel properties or attractions or sites or various other aspects. So it's a complete solution that we provide overseas in ensuring the tour operators are informed of the changes, the new attractions, new hotel developments, what Sri Lanka can do as a leisure destination to invite tourists from different parts of the country. So locally, we do interact with many stakeholders in ensuring we establish contact with all of them. In addition to that, we also have an association called Sri Lanka Inbound Tourist Association for the DMCs. And essentially, the interaction of association is mainly to coordinate on behalf of all our members and interact. We have my colleagues who are heading specific areas. One of them would take part and coordinate with the airport and aviation people. Another bunch of people, another couple of them would participate and interact with Central Cultural Fund. Another colleague of mine would interact with the wildlife department and officials attached to that. So like that, we interact with all of the local institutions, mainly to educate them and make them understand of the visitor experience, and to see how we can assist them in enhancing that entire visitor experience for overseas visitors. So that's essentially, and then of course we also sit in the Sri Lanka Development Board in sort of interacting with them on the development side of tourism in the country, as well as with Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Board in participating in and giving our input on the promotional side.
That's a large area that you cover, like quite a bit of an area, yes? Thank you,
yes. On the post-COVID side, I firmly believe we did notice a lot of the travelers wanting that human interaction, 24-hour contactability, the dependency in the destination. Though some of the service providers do talk about this 24/7 connectivity. You generally go through a telephone call, then digital connectivity, then you press a number, go to another area. So you do not connect with a local participant directly, whereas destination management companies have a mobile number and they are available 24/7 with one ring. They would answer the call and make sure that necessary assistance is provided. So what we can do as a destination management company, and the way we see post-COVID, the traveler will be a lot more comfortable having a local name, local contact number, local management company taking care of their entire solution. And we also become then the one-stop shop for all their requirements without having to talk to multiple number of service providers to manage their stay in the country. So overall, I feel and that opportunity in interacting with the destination management company and our requirement will be much greater than it was prior to COVID.
Sure. And that is, I think it gives them that added security as well. Just to check with you, with the opening of the airport and welcoming tourists from August 1st, are there any special incentives, or are you looking at anything, how to incentivize working with your groups? Do you have anything in place already, or do you have plans for that?
Well, we feel, and we are engaging with the government authorities and institution and the marketing team of the NTO as well. We feel it's an ideal time to support the tour operator overseas. These are the partners who have been thick and thin of Sri Lanka tourism over the years. Prior to Easter 2019, what we felt was consumer marketing was more appropriate at the time, because most of the tour operators engage with the local counterparts in selling Sri Lanka or marketing Sri Lanka. But now the tour operators have a multiple number of destinations that they can sell. Every single destination would require that additional push for them. So I think they will be the main partner to go and support them and then invite them to build Sri Lanka again. And they are very fond of the country. They are very fond of the people. They are fond of their counterparts as well. And I feel the time is right for us to support our tour operator partners in right across the globe and get them to feature Sri Lanka the way they did pre-COVID.
Thank you, Amit. And we don't have the sort of the quarantine. We won't be having the quarantine period for visitors who are arriving, but several countries have many health and safety protocols in place. They can be somewhat stringent, they can be challenging. How do you plan to work around the different health and safety measures and post-COVID requirements that different countries will introduce for their travelers?
I think as a destination, we cannot compromise on the safety side or a second wave, as they talk about now in different media channels and various things. We've done exceptionally well the last 3 months, and we need to make sure that every step we take forward is a step in the right direction. So it's necessary that we have all the required health standards maintained, but it's also important that we make sure that the visitor experience is not negative in any sense, while we do not compromise on the health side. So therefore, for us as a service provider, we are engaging with the government authorities and the Sri Lanka tourism to see that how many of such protocols can be managed or minimized as we go forward. But it's necessary that we take baby steps. Nobody is fully aware of exactly the right way to go forward. We need to ensure that the first steps are done properly, and then maybe revisit the entire protocol, entire practices in place, maybe 1 month or 2 months down the road, and to see how we can ease that that experience or increase though enhance that experience as far as the visitors are concerned. So that's how we see it. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question for you. How do you see a potential for any new markets? We have our traditional markets that have been predominantly very strong for Sri Lanka, but due to this current situation, the type of travel restrictions, as well as, like you said, the second wave or a high level number of positive patients have been in some of our primary markets. India, for example, was one of our key markets. Do you see the emergence of new markets in this new era that we are heading into?
Well, not more than new markets. I see there is tremendous amount of potential for us to increase the share of market share we have had from some of our small market shares. I mean, if you really look at some of the regional markets, we believe some of the first countries to enter Sri Lanka will be the regional markets, at least the next 3 to 4 months before we go out to our traditional markets or the European markets in towards the winter or beginning early next year. But in our regional markets, we see, I mean, countries like Korea, they produced only 12,000, 15,000 in 2018. That is our best year. And that segment can easily grow to a larger component. Similarly, Malaysia, Singapore, I feel those countries can produce larger numbers to Sri Lanka, provided there is air connectivity. And with Malaysia and Singapore in particular, we have great air connectivity. And therefore, I feel these markets can produce more. And because the way we have structured the COVID issue in Sri Lanka, there'll be a lot more confidence for them to think of traveling to Sri Lanka vis-a-vis possibly another country. So as well as I also see a segmentation. I think Dileep mentioned this as well. The segmentation to specific areas where Sri Lanka may not have marketed well enough in the past in terms of wellness, in terms of Ayurveda, in terms of indigenous medicine. Of course, we need to market ourselves. Nobody's going to get to know about these things by default. We need to really go and market ourselves. But there is that segmentation. If we do market it well, that we can invite that traveler who would have otherwise thought of another destination, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you. I think we've taken up quite a bit of time. David, back to you.
Thank you, Danushka, Amit. Thank you so much for that. We're going to move on the conversation a little bit, and we're going to talk about villas. Villas is a product which is well known in Sri Lanka for space and quality, and this is perhaps a really good area in post-COVID. So I'm going to introduce you, please, to John Stonham, who is the CEO of Elite Havens Group, and Jack Eden, who's the founder of Eden Villas and co-owner of Gaul Events. John, Jack, could you show yourselves, please, and unmute yourselves?
Great. David, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the kind introductions. Maybe I'll introduce Jack a little bit more. Jack, you've been in Sri Lanka for, gosh, 21 years now, 22 years.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
And probably I consider to be the pioneer of villas in Sri Lanka, in terms, certainly on the south coast. And over those 20 years, you've seen an awful lot of change. How's the last 5 months been, and sort of what have you had to do in the villas, and really how have your owners reacted?
Well, good. Well, thanks for that, John, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody who's out there. I think that sort of pre-January or pre-December, looking back in the last few years, there was a tremendous amount of goodwill towards Sri Lanka. So that this allowed us to recover pretty swiftly, the bounce back to recover pretty swiftly post-Easter last year. But just looking at the last decade, tourism is really in its infancy here. Peace was declared in 2009, and we started to move forward fairly swiftly, but still fairly young. In the last few months, this has been a global impact. Everywhere is devastated. Sri Lanka has not been spared a sort of massive drop in arrivals. But the quick acts of the government, as Kimarli mentioned earlier, really have allowed Sri Lanka to begin to emerge as one of those destinations which has had very few cases. And so that begins to put us on a fairly good footing to go forward. And I can tell you, anybody who hasn't seen the sort of guidelines, the government guidelines on the hotel and tourism sector, they are incredibly strict. And that will give confidence going forward to people coming back. Just touching on sort of villa owners and the last aspect of your question. People who own villas in Sri Lanka generally have done so for a holiday destination for themselves, as opposed to a means to generate income for themselves. So this has allowed them, albeit referencing to their own situations back home, it's allowed them to be incredibly supportive of the staff particularly. And in fact, we've had no layoffs in the sector at all. And so that's been very encouraging, and it's given the staff lots of comfort and building the teams. So hopefully, when things do start to recover, we've got a good place, which I think is an excellent start.
What we're beginning to see now is, and it may be because the airport is looking to open in the 1st of August, is we're beginning to get inquiries back now for the first time in a long time, and I mean, still from a very low base. But we are actually getting some optimism now because we are getting inquiries. They seem to be coming from 2 or 3 areas. One is the sort of domestic market who really doesn't want to be cooped up, say, in Colombo. But we're also getting sort of international inquiries. Now, traditionally, the villa market is families, and I guess they will be a little bit more conservative. But we're seeing a new market really in terms of groups of young people. Maybe they feel a little bit more robust in the current environment, but we're seeing those inquiries. Are you seeing those inquiries as well? And where are you seeing them from? And what are their sort of issues that they're posing for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's quite a big question there. The domestic market, first of all, is definitely something we're seeing. It's very competitive. And there are some fantastic hotels out there to stay in, and so which pre-COVID, were quite fairly handsomely priced. So they're dropping prices quite significantly. So there is a bit of a domestic market for villas. It tends to be very short lead-in. We tend to get an inquiry on a Thursday or a Friday for a weekend booking, but we've also taken inquiries where. For longer stays, as you mentioned, people wanting not to be cooped up in Colombo. And now with the infrastructure in Sri Lanka, particularly feeding the south coast, you can get from Colombo to Galle in an hour. So it becomes a real sort of weekend destination for people. And we've seen people renting a villa for 6 months or so, but only to be used at weekends. Internationally, I agree with you. It's sort of the same that we're seeing the same that you are. Inquiries are beginning to trickle in, mostly from our recent markets like the middle expats in the Middle East or Southeast Asia. The European markets are coming. Inquiries are trickling in, mostly for perhaps the end of the year or first quarter of next year. I'm sure. In fact, I know, like you, because we had a chat about it at the time, that a lot of our guests took credit notes rather than sought refund, and they have rebooked towards the end of the first quarter of next year. So that's very positive, and I think that trend should continue, really.
One of the things we're hearing from our guests is that the villa and I guess the smaller boutique hotel is a preferable accommodation to a large hotel, in the terms that sort of it gives us sort of natural social distancing, and your interaction with people you don't know is more limited. Are you getting that vibe from your clients as well?
Yes, we are. I think news of sort of cruise ships and being stuck in ports and something doesn't really do much to encourage the sort of larger stay in a larger sort of 300 room sort of accommodation style, whether it's on land or at sea. So I think the smaller hotels, the more boutique-y type of service-led environment, and villas will be going forward. We'll sort of see a significant boost. Initially, I think it's going to be the hotels, the smaller hotels that will attract more attention because of their bigger marketing budgets. And as I say, you know, their ability to drop prices quite significantly because they can boost it from F&B. But yeah, you know, villas are private. They are secure. They do have low staff turnover on a daily basis because you can have the staff in there permanently. All these factors that villas tend to do are now coming up to the forefront to make them very attractive. I think that's going to be the same all over the world, actually.
Great. And one final question. I guess people are booking for us. We're seeing bookings at Christmas as our first sort of little blip. We're not really seeing much before that. And then the next sense of optimism seems to be for Easter next year. Is that sort of the timelines you think is realistic?
Let's have a chat about that in a couple of months. Listen, I think that Sri Lanka, as I mentioned earlier, because of the swift action and strict action, it's got to be said, you know, it has put the country in a good place right now. There have been no cases since the end of April. No cases in the community, sorry, since the end of April. And we will all be able to see what happens after August. And by sort of the middle of the last quarter, you know, we'll see how things are going. But you know, based on whether there are any further cases, based on how people are treated when they get here, and based on how much enjoyment and the reports they get when they get back home, yeah, I think it is a realistic timeline for bookings to come back in the first quarter of next year. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Jack. Hand it back over, David.
Thanks,
John, Jack. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to move on to have a look at one market, a specific market. Bill Barnett has some insights that he has prepared. Author of the China Sri Lanka Travel Sentiment Survey 2020. Bill, please.
David, thanks so much. And I see Jack there. Actually, Jack's looking like a stand-in for Tom Hanks in Castaway. You know, one of a sequel to. For God's sake, go shave, mate. All I can say is, you know, one thing we've been working in Sri Lanka for the past decade. It's, you know, it's an exciting place, and hats off to Danushka certainly for you know helping us bring this event together, because it's an event which people love this destination. I think it's something that people have passion about it. And it's a very important destination. I think that's something about it's unique. You know, Sri Lankan food, Sri Lankan, the style, the ambiance of the place is culturally different. I think that's something which everybody loves. So I think, you know, getting a great group of people today talking about Sri Lanka, that's the start of reopening. And I think that's really what we're kicking off today. And we're looking for green shoots. I think when we look at everything else, one thing I do have a hard time understanding when we talk about green shoots and markets to come back still continues to be India. You know, and something about, you know, why isn't the Indian market more prolific? And we're going to go to China in a minute, but India is so close but so near. And, you know, why aren't there bigger Indian numbers? I sit in Thailand. I understand the power of Indigo Airlines and Go Airlines coming into this market. And to me, you know, going forward, as we look at the reopening, we look at the recovery of this market, certainly India should play a bigger part. But let's talk about China as well, because China continues to be a big player. And as we see the post-COVID recovery for China, the connection to Sri Lanka continues to be impressive in terms of airlift in terms of the economic machine as well. And, you know, fish where the fish are. And so when we went into first tier cities in China and talked to qualified travelers about what their sentiment was towards Sri Lanka. And I think this was done in late May of this year. We were, you know, again, we're looking at first tier cities, not second tier cities, and qualified travelers. And we talked to over 1,000 people, you know, in terms of what was the sentiment towards Sri Lanka and what was the sentiment towards travel. And I think what's impressive is over 88% of people said they want to travel overseas. You know, there's that pent up demand, right? You know, I think that's very important when we talk about things. You know, people want to get out. They, you know, for the Chinese, they want to go beyond the mainland as well. So that's very important. And when we talk about when people want to travel, again, almost half the people want to travel late this year or early next year. That's a good sign. It's like people aren't saying it's going to be in 2 or 3 years from now. They're saying they would like to travel at this time. And I think one thing that's important to understand is the people we're talking to now are it could be a different demographic versus the mass Chinese market. And I guess the indications are when China reopens in post-COVID, what is the new traveler? And so I think somehow we're going to get a feel of the sentiment, but it's not necessarily going to be demonstrative of the whole market later on. You know, I think when we talk about travel to Sri Lanka, certainly in terms of, you know, it's good because 1 out of 3 travelers are saying Sri Lanka is a safe destination. You know, this is a good figure because when we looked also at Maldives last week, and we've been talking to people about the Maldives as destinations, well, they feel these destinations because they're more natural and the atmosphere is more private as well, they feel it's a safe destination. I think safety is going to be important. You know, when I go back to 9/11, people, you know, again, you know, for 20 years, people still take their shoes off at certain airports around the world, but people got on airplanes again. And post-COVID crisis, people will travel again. But for the first, those baby steps, they're going to look at safe destinations. I think it bodes well for Sri Lanka. And 77% would like to travel to Sri Lanka. I think that's also good because it says there's sentiment. I think something when we talk about what's driving them or demand drivers of this destination, we go back to nature, which shouldn't be a surprise. Wild animals certainly as well, and safari adventures. We're seeing more and more people attracted to those. And those are natural attractions in Sri Lanka again. Beach resorts continue to be important, but you know, look at the cities. It's not a huge demand for, you know, this is a change of behavior. I believe if we would have looked at the same survey a year ago, we would have had different results. So again, there is different sentiment out there about what people want to do in those baby steps in post-COVID travel. I think that's certainly important. It's interesting to go back and see the perception of value. And we're not saying Sri Lanka should be cheap, but what is the perception about a holiday in Sri Lanka? Is that, again, you're looking at, it's about the same as others in terms of that. You know, again, it's not overwhelming that it should be a cheap destination. So that's a good thing, you know, in terms of things. You know, we've looked at other destinations in Southeast Asia, and the perception was it should be cheaper. But people understand that Sri Lanka, it's a premium holiday destination. And with the Chinese, that's good. There is sentiment that it's going to be about the same cost. So I think that's a good. And in terms of travel preferences, this is important because, you know, again, the 4-star hotels, and it's something I don't get about, people often ask me, where does Sri Lanka, you know, we go back, it's been a decade after the political issues there in terms of coverage, and we can't really benchmark it to Vietnam. Vietnam, it's been almost 30 years. You know, Vietnam opened up again in the early 1990s, so Vietnam certainly is an advanced stage. But the one thing we haven't seen in Sri Lanka over the past decade is really that move to independent travel. And that continues to be a little bit of a mystifier for us because we feel that, you know, when you look at the 4-star traveler, you know, if I go to Colombo, I'll stay at the Cinnamon Red. I know how to book a car. I know how to do this type of things. In broader tourism, that trend really hasn't become a dominant issue back in Sri Lanka. But if I go to places like Vietnam or go to Cambodia or these type of countries, it has been. So that continues to be something which would spur a broader market, we think, in time. In terms of China, it's very specific. Certainly C-Trip is a big provider. But we are seeing people more, you know, again, you're not looking at Google, you're not looking at Facebook, you're not looking at these type of TripAdvisor. You look at social networking, you look at WeChat, you look at Fliggy, which is part of Alibaba as well. And the ability to market through these direct channels certainly is rising in China. I think that's very important because you can reach out to consumers, return consumers now and say, we don't necessarily have to go through the old machines, we can go through these other machines as well. And kind of wrapping up, because we're going to go quickly here, is that 75% of these surveyed, and again, these are early travelers, would prefer independent travel. I think that's important because we're seeing a younger demographic of Chinese who are saying we're the post-COVID travelers, and they would travel alone, or they would travel, as Jack said, and I know John was talking about friends friends traveling together. You know, this whole phenomenon about younger people renting the bigger villas or staying in hotel rooms, having multiple hotel rooms with bunk beds, this type of accommodation, that's continuing on. And I think when we look at the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to see more independent travel. We're going to see younger travelers who are those taking the first baby steps back. Over time, in 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a return to more traditional markets. But if you're marketing right now, fish where the fish are, because this is where it is. And I think really when we take a look forward, we think Sri Lanka certainly is well positioned for the recovery because, again, it offers space, it offers nature, it offers these atmospheres of getting away from the city. That doesn't mean Colombo as a stopping up point is not attractive, but it means that people want to get away from these things as well and have space. So I think you're well positioned there in Sri Lanka for this. I think, David, that's all for me today.
Thanks, Bill. Excellent insights as always. We're just going to quickly continue the China theme. We have Vanessa Zhu, who's joining us from Delivering Age Communications' office in Shanghai. Is just going to talk a little bit more in detail about the post-COVID traveler from China. And the reason is because the post-COVID, China's been the first market to recover. It's recovered quickly. There's been people on the streets there for some time. Lockdown has stopped some time ago. Vanessa, please just give us a few insights into the new China traveler and how to contact them.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So yes, the China travelers are ready. So they are pretty much like a new independent traveler. They're confident, they're young, they're healthy, they're brave, they are experienced with traveling, and they have money. So as Bill said, they are pretty much interested about nature, culture. So I think Sri Lanka has a unique opportunity to offer all this experience in abundance. So how to reach Chinese market? So those kind of group of people, they are pretty much young. So they are between 20, 30, and 40s. And during the isolation, there's a new habit has been trained out because we have more time stay at home, we cannot go out. So people start holding their mobile phones and then looking at the social media. So one of the social media is called TikTok. In China, we call them Douyin. So with TikTok, it contains a lot of video clips. So it's lasts from 30 seconds to 3 or 5 minutes. And right now, it even add a new function, which is live streaming. So people get information, visual information from TikTok a lot, Douyin. And it has right now has over 400 million daily active users. So think about the numbers. The interesting part about TikTok, the Douyin, is TikTok is partially owned by Alibaba. And Alibaba also owns about this direct pay apps called Alipay. So basically you just need to, so right now the new purchasing habit for Chinese customer actually is they don't bring cash. They don't use much Apple Pay. They just use the Alipay. So they go somewhere, they scan the QR code from the business owner, the shopper, and then scan that, put the number in, then the money transfer to the owner's bank account. And also another one, which is a Fliggy. So Fliggy actually is the tourism product session from Taobao. Taobao is one, right now it's like an eBay, but now is the biggest and one of the major online shopping platform for Chinese users. So a little bit different from Ctrip. Ctrip, which OTA holds a lot of power, so OTA select the product from the hotel. However, on Fliggy, it's more like a shopping mall. So each hotel can open its own online store on Fliggy. So each hotel can design its own products. No need to approve, no need to, no need approve from OTA. And then people will shopping on the Fliggy. People can also, by watching the Douyin contents with inserted the Fliggy purchasing link, then very soon, if they like it, they click and then they pay via Alipay and the money goes to your pocket, just in a snapshot. Yeah. So this is kind of like a Fliggy, Alipay, and Douyin is kind of an ecosystem. Pretty much used by every single Chinese right now. So excellent. I think it's the new way. Yeah.
Wow, something to think about. Vanessa, thank you. Much appreciated. I'm just going to get to some questions for our panelists, please. Investment. Investment is the first one we've got today. Are you seeing any properties changing hands now? What is the current climate for investment for hotels, and how are they moving? Thilan, one for you, please.
Yes, pertinent question.
Just some insights.
Yes, pertinent question. I'm getting hotels for sale on my text messages, emails. Yes, their hotels have come to market. They're primarily by the owners who are selling. I believe the next wave could be even the banks working with the owners to look at sale or attracting equity. So the answer to your question is yes, hotels have come to market.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to follow up with another investment question for you while you're with us. And it's a question which is investment versus revenue. Advice to hoteliers. You know, what sort of things should they be looking at? Should they continue to invest when they don't have the cash flow, they don't have the revenue coming in? What sort of considerations would you advise for them to consider?
Look at your performance. If you were operating pre-Easter, was your positioning right? Was your management right? What was your competitive position vis-a-vis newer products? So really, you've got to be that much more diligent, prudent in your investment decision than when Sri Lanka opened up post the end of the conflict in 2009. You've got to be far more focused. If you're not an expert if you're from another industry, please hire an expert to understand whether it's worthwhile you're investing, because build and they shall come is not going to work anymore.
Thank you. Okay, very clear advice there for hoteliers out there who are listening. Social distancing, Dileep, we've got something here regarding social distancing and hotels. What sort of things are you introducing? And specifically, are there any tech changes, any technological changes that are expected with more contactless engagement in hotels? I mean, this is almost a little bit of an investment question again. So, I mean, hotels, you know, what are you looking at doing to facilitate social distancing and contactless behavior?
I mean, there are many things that you can do with and without technology is concerned. So actually, from the time of arrival, when you go to earlier we had a requirement to go to the reception, spend there, and then your time signing, etc. So those processes can be shortened to great extent, because the occupancies can little be low at the initial stage, then the room in check-in, etc. So that's all falling to the health and safety standards. And then even when it comes to payments, etc., you can actually create mechanisms where people don't really touch on cash, but in the card payments, prepayments, etc. So there is a certain technology. For example, most of the people use the gun, you know, the temperature reading, but some actually move into the face recognition, temperature recognition. So those things, again, a capex cost will come into play. So the question is that how much you going to have that in a hotel? You have metal detectors, you have temperature reading. So when you enter into a hotel, you don't feel like, you know, you're going through so many things. So it's, I think we need to be a little cautious on when you're using this technology. Hotel is not exactly like an airport or maybe inside an aircraft. It has to more personal touch should be there. So there are so many things you can do within the infrastructure so that you don't actually add on costs to your operation. It's easy to actually fix. There are some very sophisticated equipments out there. You can easily do that. But whether it's really at the value, you need to be very carefully evaluated. And the meantime, protecting the safety of the people who are coming in.
Thank you. Do you have a rough estimate, just with your visibility on the hospitality market in Sri Lanka, the numbers of hotels that are open now, currently open?
I think
all the
hotels are literally ready to go. The question is a matter of having clients, because since the arrival aircraft, the airport is also open. Only thing, the flights are not coming into that because we're only looking at from 1st of August. So without the tourists, the domestic market is not big enough to fulfill the entire hotel network. So they're open. I mean, there are a lot of hotels go 5, 6, 7, 8 rooms occupied, right? And even the guest house is all open down south. I was there the last 2 days. So it's open, but the question is having a sufficient number of rooms.
Right, exactly. John and Jack, villa market. There's been a few questions about this actually, and they relate specifically to health. There's been a lot of talk, and Jack, you talked about it a couple of times about the stringency and the the wisdom actually of very stringent health measures, health protocols for the market and to help its recovery. The question is how can people be guaranteed that those are being implemented at a villa level?
John, shall I go with that first? Yeah, well, I will. How can people be guaranteed? Well, I think it's the confidence of the villa manager and the villa management company to demonstrate to guests that these protocols are being followed, and to give the confidence that confidence starts with the first level of communication that we have with our guests, whether they're booking direct or with an agent. And from the moment that they land in the country to then arriving at the villa, is how they're greeted, and confidence in hygiene and cleanliness going forward. I think one of the attractions of a smaller hotel and a villa is that it's very easy for a guest to walk around the whole thing, including into the kitchens, including into the back of house, is check the cleanliness yourselves, check the hygiene, and that'll be very apparent. And so, you know, the protocols are really strict, and that's an excellent thing. And I think we can give confidence.
Thank you. John, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think Jack's hit it very clearly. I mean, we've changed our SOPs. I mean, I like to think we never had a dirty villa. You know, we run luxury villas and they're spotlessly clean. But we've had to re-educate the staff, especially on hygiene. We've had to re-educate the staff in terms of how to interact with guests, because what we're finding is that guests' expectations are very different. We have some guests who want high service levels and high contact, and we have some guests who want actually totally to be left alone. So there's a lot of training going in, and as part of that is to follow the SOPs, which make sure all these guidelines are adhered to. But, you know, most of these staff are dedicated to each individual villa, and they realize that the performance of that villa is down to the performance of them. And so therefore they become very passionate about their own property, and make sure that it delivers the best for their guests. So it's a matter, I think Jack's right, it's down to the management company and down to their ownership of the property by the villa staff.
Thank you. Danushka, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I hope you don't mind. Just a couple of questions about the market, please. I'm really keen to tap into your long experience in travel and tourism. What do you see as some of the key trends post-COVID, and how important is it that the airlines really come back, and they come back quickly?
I think the airlines are already very positive. They're ready to come back. Unfortunately, I just got a message that the chairman of Sri Lankan is unable to make it. He had a very important meeting to attend and was hoping he could be here, but he's unable to make it. But he would be glad to do a segment with you, David and Bill, sometime whenever you need him to. He'll be happy to answer all your questions. So the airline, as you said, the airlines play a very important role in this whole tourism offering that Sri Lanka has. And going forward, as Amit and Dileep and all very clearly emphasized, there will be a shift. We won't be the same way we were before. There'll be definitely, the demands will be different, the protocols will be different, and they're evolving. So I don't really think that we would have one set of rules or plans in place that we can follow. It will be changing, and I think we all have to be ready to go ahead with those changes as and when they come to us. So it's evolving, and I don't see anything static happening in the near future. We keep getting news and updates on what's going on in the world and how things are changing, and how each country has their own restrictions as well as their policies. And I think we need to be adaptable. We need to be able to change. We need to be able to focus on what's important for the benefit of tourism and move forward.
Danushka, thank you. Thanks very much. David Keane, brand Sri Lanka. We've heard a lot about nature. We've heard a lot about culture. What sort of advice would you give to the key stakeholders in Sri Lanka regarding positioning the country as a brand?
That's a small question, David.
You've got about 30 seconds for it.
I've been, as you know, I mean, I've been involved in Sri Lanka for nearly 20 years, and I've been involved with many of the brands in the country. I believe that Sri Lanka is the biggest gold mine in Asia in terms of underutilized brand equity. There's an unbelievable opportunity with the younger generation in Sri Lanka who have all returned and are sitting on amazing brain power and amazing entrepreneurialism. And I think, as Thilan was saying, I mean, whether it's with China Port City or the mixed-use development of Colombo, or the attrition within the hotel industry or the hotel resort industry, and how it's going to come back, the opportunity of repositioning the country at the forefront of thinking of South Asia and being nimble and agile, and certainly much more so than its northern neighbor, will give Sri Lanka the chance, and it has the chance now with a very stable government, it has the chance now to reconsider itself, reposition itself as a thought leader and as a technology leader, as a manufacturing, as a retail leader, as well as a tourism leader for many, many years to come. So in my opinion, the opportunity is unprecedented, especially because of all the drama and troubles that the country has been through over from the war through to the Easter bombings, through to obviously the current crisis.
Thank you, David. There's just going to be a couple of other quick questions. Amit, what sort of products are you seeing that are really doing well? What are the products that people are most interested in for people who are going to be visiting Sri Lanka soon?
Well, as I pointed out, the wellness, the yoga, Ayurveda, the indigenous medicine, the nature, culture, that area will have a little bit more interest, I suppose, post-COVID, as again, more congested city travel. Though certain markets demand for city travel more than outside of Colombo, I think even that will have a bit of a shift initially until they become comfortable. I think this testing period, which is going to be very vital for all of us in all markets, not just for Sri Lanka, in my opinion. There'll be a lot of learning curve here for all of us. And I suppose there'll be at some stage, there will be so-called the best practices post-COVID coming into play as well, that we learn from another country's success. I think for all of us at this initial stage, from August or July until about September end, there'll be a lot of learning experiences for all of us. But during that period, it is essential and it's paramount important that we do our little bit right without having any sort of a setback to all the good things we have done so far. So initially, I suppose the client requirements will be for more open areas, more terrain where there is no congestion and people be able to freely move around.
I mean, thank you. Thank you. Bill Barnett, closing remarks, please, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I think, as I said, airlift is going to define everything, and that's going to really be the most important thing. And it's interesting because we're seeing the protocols now emerging. People said, why would Chinese want to come to Sri Lanka? It's because these bilateral agreements. And when you see countries who will be negotiating these bilateral agreements, that's where you're going to see these travel bubbles creation. But we think what we're talking and understanding is that the resort markets will start to see the ability to contain travelers and have a safe holiday. The first, these are going to be the points of entry, because for travelers, they can have that health and safety. And I think that's going to be the emergence. But after that, it's going to be all games are off, because at the end of the day, everybody else is going to want to see tourism back. So I think we're going to see a quicker return after that, but it's going to be these travel bubbles, airlift, and bilateral agreements, which will define recovery or reopening. That's going to be key. David,
thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, everyone, very much for attending today. And thank you to all the speakers, Vanessa, Bill, just who's closing there, Jack, John, Amit, Thilan, Dileep, David Keane, and Kimarli Fernando. And Danushka, of course, thank you very much for your help. Thank you, everyone. There's going to be a recording, and it's going to be sent to everyone after the session if you want to review or pass it on.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey,
Bye.
thanks.